Hello and welcome. We are at the Women Deliver conference in Copenhagen. Thousands of people are gathered here and many more are joining us online to discuss the welfare of women and girls worldwide. Many at the conference will say health and education are key to empowerment. But what then when conflict, war, or natural disasters get in the way of normal life? Here in the studio, I have with me former Australian Prime Minister Gillard, who's a passionate advocate of girls' empowerment and chairs the Global Partnership for Education. We also have Kenyan lawyer Rachel Muthoga, who set up Moving the Goalposts, an organization using football as a tool to enable girls, and lawyer and activist Cecilia Aransiola, who's a Nigerian lawyer and human rights activist whose passionate goal is to make sure all girls have access to education. Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Let's start with you, Julia. Girls in conflict zone. Are girls particularly affected by wars than their male counterpart, and in what way?
Yes, they are, tragically. We know that there are 75 million children who are living in conflict zones, and their chance of going to school is dramatically reduced by the conflict. Only 50% of primary school children get to go to school, and 25% of secondary school children. And the ones most likely to miss out, 2.5 times more likely to miss out, are girls. And that is because when there are difficult choices to be made, impoverished families, pressurised families, concerns about safety and security, it will often be the girls who are kept at home.
And we've just seen a UN report that deals with peacemakers who themselves go in to violate girls, and sexual violence, a very big part of war. And this is where you come in, Rachel. Much of your work has focused on sexual violence at times of war. Tell us about it.
So one of the things that is of great concern is that much as sexual violence can happen against men or women, we know that women carry the heavier burden and are the highest number of victims of sexual violence. Now, there have been international attempts to deal with it, but it has always come to every time that we have a conflict in any new area, we have seen an increase in violence against women. And so looking at what are the solutions that the world has offered is partly, being able to intervene at the earliest opportunity, so humanitarian entry into the situation. But as you mentioned, that has had the negative effect of then bringing in perpetrators into a situation that was already bad. But then the other thing that we've done is that we have an international criminal procedure that tries to intervene in matters such as sexual violence, and it's a big step in the world that the Rome Statute has recognized sexual violence as one of the war crimes that can be tried. And so it's a big step for us, but then enforcement and being able to implement this, and lastly and most importantly, the deterrent effect that it can have. Will future, soldiers, will future fighters have that thought at the back of their mind that I should not do this, because if I do, then I am likely to be held accountable. So if we can be able to achieve that, I think that would be the best case scenario.
Cecilia, I imagine this is also a matter that's very close to your heart, coming from Nigeria, with the world's focus on the Chibok girls. And I've just read now that one of them has been found with a baby. One doesn't know whether to celebrate that 1 out of 219 girls has been found, or just lament the fact that so many months later, it's just too little, too late. Just tell us about the mood in the country. Is this a real fear? Do families fear for their girls in their families?
It's indeed sad, because today makes it 765 days since our Chibok girls have been taken. It's indeed a scar on the conscience of our nation that girls would want to get an education and they ended up being abducted and nothing has been done about it. For us as a nation, we have 10.5 million children out of school. That is huge, and 60% are girls. And the saddening thing is we were making a slight progress, but the issue of our Chibok girls has further endangered education. No child must have to choose between staying alive and getting an education. The story is out. We don't have any empirical evidence yet. We are yet to confirm from government, but the truth is other girls who were not Chibok girls have been abducted. We have over 2,000 people with Boko Haram. Girls have been turned into wives of, I call it in quotes, wives of Boko Haram soldiers. So it's indeed very tragic. And with the high number of displaced people we have, it's also a problem, because most girls in displaced camps are not going to school. That's further endangering their lives, and child marriage is going on in those displaced persons camp. It's indeed a shame on us as a nation.
I also understand that in Nigeria, it's not just the fear is not just about girls and children, but teachers also fear going
Yes.
to school. Tell us about that.
We have 611 teachers who have been killed. It's indeed sad. 19,000 have been displaced from their homes. And you know, they are scared for their lives because schools have become a target. Hundreds of schools have been burnt. Over 1,005 schools have been closed down for lots of months now. So it's not only the girls, even teachers and school authorities, they cannot return to school because everyone is scared for their lives.
Julia, we have to try, we have to explore solutions. And Global Partnership for Education, in what way is it a response to this? Because listening to both Cecilia and Rachel, I'm left feeling these girls were at school where they should have been safe. So for them, education didn't protect them. How do we come up with a solution?
No, what we've heard and what we're discussing is just absolutely heartbreaking, just so dreadful to think about those girls, to think about the teachers, to see violence against education does, of course, distress all of us. But overwhelmingly, we do know that being in school is a protective factor for girls. So part of our mission is to make sure that schools are safe places for girls to be and to go to, that the journey to and from school is not an unsafe journey. So in places like Yemen and Cote d'Ivoire, we have worked with governments on working out where schools should be so that we're shortening the journey of girls to school. That makes it more realistic that they're going to go. It makes it safer for them to go. And we've also worked on teacher training, workforce training, including more female teachers, so that it is more likely that families will be prepared to send their girls to school. There are no easy answers here. We work on the, patient work of working with developing countries, planning education systems, funding them, strengthening them, because we think systems that work well are the best way of achieving at scale access to learning, and equitable systems that don't leave the girls behind. But there is more for our world to do, more to do in this task of development, and more to do for girls in crisis and conflict. And I've certainly been working towards, with others, most notably Gordon Brown, the Special Envoy of the United Nations for Education, to there being further resources made available for education in crisis and conflict out of the Istanbul World Humanitarian Summit, which will be held next week.
What about the counter-argument that in a war zone, the most important concern, the priority, is to keep citizens safe? How do we balance the right to safety and security and the need for education? Because in the aftermath of war, you still need institutions that are strong.
Yes, you do. And when people are literally fleeing bullets and bombs, then immediately physical safety is what the focus is on. And then as humanitarian assistance is rolled out, of course, there has to be the water, the food, the shelter, the medical supplies. But our case is that whilst those humanitarian efforts are being made, we also need to be making a start on education. And we know that children in those circumstances ask for education. They actually, for children who used to go to school, find it something reassuring in a world of crisis and conflict and change and trauma, to have that sense that, yeah, there is still something a little bit the same here. I still go to something called a school. I go to a place where there are other children and we do things that are lessons together. That is tremendously important for the sort of psychosocial, emotional frame of those children. And you only get one go at childhood. If too many years get past and there is no education and no learning, then those children will never go back to school with all of the lifetime disadvantage that comes with it.
And Rachel, the same theme to you. I mean, organizations such as yourself, you being very creative and innovative, using football to reach the masses. Yet at the same time, you do need political will. And I have in mind the Garissa massacre at university. I think 152 people, men and women, students, male and female students, were killed. And yet your organization is dealing with this at grassroots, even though it's an overwhelming political issue. Tell me what the results have been.
I mean, the Garissa attack for us was, of course, a big blow to education. I mean, I think it's also important to understand that Garissa in Kenya is one of those disadvantaged areas where we celebrated that they now had a university of that level, of a national category. And we had girls even from Kilifi, which is down at the coast where we work, who were attending school there. So it was already a big achievement for education in Kenya. And so for that attack to take place there, it was a major drawback, and it's pulled us back a long, it's taken us back a long way, because one is the fear, especially for girls and young women. 19-year-old daughter is going off to college. Parents are unlikely to then make the choice to send their daughters to those distant places, which then disadvantages a lot of girls who are trying to make the case at home for why should I even go to college in the first place. And so looking at, especially in conflict situations and the situations that Madame Gillard was just referring to, in those extreme cases, it's still important to have at the back of the mind that the humanitarian response at the earliest opportunity has to incorporate education. And it doesn't always have to be that we're going to have to build classes and we have to put in blackboards, but what sort of engagement can we have with the children that will still be stimulating to them, that will still keep them engaged in learning. And so approaches such as using football, like being able to use football drills to pass messages, and it could be social messages, it could be basic education messages, but something active and that keeps the children not focusing on the external, the devastation and the problems that their families are facing, but focusing their minds on something that is developmental for them, can really make a big difference. So it's about being able to use as many creative approaches as we can to ensure that as much as possible we do not interrupt the flow of education in that young person's life. And even if it means using, in a refugee setting, there are many children who have grown up in refugee centers in Kenya, in Dadaab and in Kakuma. But to look at what resources do you have even in that refugee setting? Do you have former teachers who are now running away? If I'm a lawyer by profession. If I'm in a camp, I still have my skills. Can I then utilize them to be able to pass information to someone, a younger person who is next to me? And so to be able to use the limited, resources that there may be, but to be able to use them to ensure that at least we keep that flow going.
Cecilia, you have said that we need to enforce a safe physical environment for girls, and also keeping in mind the Chibok girls. In your view, what are some of the successes thus far? What are some of the initiatives that have been introduced to create this safe environment? And I ask this because there's a lot of disappointment with the way the world has responded to the missing girls, beyond the hashtag, beyond the activism, which is very, very important. But I suppose until they are found, there'll always be a sense of failure at a political level.
With the Nigerian government, they actually pledged to bring up mobile schools, which are containerized schools for people who have been displaced, because most of the schools have been turned useless. They are being used by people who have been displaced, that is the internally displaced person. So schools are no longer serving their purposes for education. For me, I think it's really important to actually have the healing method, classroom methodology, because when kids are able to leave such environment to have an alternative education, what's happening in Nigeria is the fact that we are not tapping so much into our resources. So most attention is being given to clothing, food items, and other relief materials. But a child only gets an opportunity to learn once. When they pass the stage of childhood, how do you get it back? It's gone for life. So, and that's the problem we have now. To be honest, it's sad that we are not doing so much more. For them, they think child education in such conflict situation, it's not a priority. But for me, I believe that both in good survival stands and in crisis, education is such a priority. It gives hope. It makes you look forward to the future. Some people are being recruited even now into Boko Haram because they don't have options. We have the Almajiri syndrome when children are roaming the streets of Nigeria because they don't have hope. The government is here to make it such a priority for us. So all we are doing as human rights people is to continue advocacy for parents to know that because the Chibok girls have been taken does not mean that education is not worth it, because Boko Haram wanted to do all they can. Boko Haram means education is a taboo. Education is haram. Education is forbidden. And that is why when they took our Chibok girls, the leader came up with a video that girls should not be in classes, and as long as he lives, he would continue to abduct girls because they should be married off. So we just continue with the community conversation, and we continue to actually engage the government, because the mobile school should be a reality. When you engage kids, they are able to, it's a way of healing trauma in conflict situations. But when they are left languishing, nothing happens. We have lots of sexual assault and child marriages in IDP camps because these girls are just wandering all around. So, and that is why we are hoping the government will actually make the promise. For now, the government made a promise to improve and train 500,000 teachers. That is a very, very good one. We hope as soon as possible that will be done because every day, every second, every minute matters in the life of every child.
This is so powerful what Cecilia is saying, and it touches on what you said earlier about education as an effective tool. It seems to me, hearing what's happening in Nigeria and Kenya, that education can also be used as an antidote to extremism, as a response to fighting extremism, because when we know better, we make better choices.
Absolutely, and I think, of the arguments for education traditionally, we've talked about personal empowerment, we've talked about the economic dividends, you help build your nation by having more skilled workers, that's good for the economy. But I think that there are several other things that we need to be considering. One is the health benefits, because the evidence is absolutely clear that an educated girl in particular is less likely to get HIV/AIDS, she's more likely when she becomes a mother to survive childbirth, her infant is more likely to survive, her infant is more likely to be vaccinated at the right time and to go to school. So you get on this, path upwards. And on national security radicalisation, there is also good evidence that if people are out of hope and out of choices, then the false promises that are sold by extremist ideology become much more seductive than if people think that there is some way that they can have a future, that they can build a life for themselves. So I think from all of these perspectives, empowerment, education as a right, the economy, health, national security, we're only going to get there to the kind of world we all want to share if we are educating our children, particularly our girls.
It's always so devastating. You wanted to come in there, Rachel?
Yes, I wanted to come in and say it's also important, especially when you're looking at girls and women, to realize, and just like the example that she's given with the Chibok girls, that girls being in the community and not having options or being even outside of the economic sphere is a big challenge, especially when it comes to radicalization and countering violent extremism. And one of the initiatives that we've started as Moving the Goalposts in partnership with the USAID and also ACT Kenya is that we are now using economic empowerment for teenagers and also young women as a way to counter violent extremism, because we know that one of the reasons why girls especially would, in cases where it's not an abduction, where an actual discussion actually takes place, they might say yes because she's looking at what are my hopes here. Sitting in this family, I don't have any aspirations, there's nothing that works for me in this village, maybe I'm better off in that new region where I'm being asked to go. And so to be able to empower them and to say, you can start a small business. The village you're living in, you can start a small tailoring business. You can become maybe the local, you can start a hairdressing business. And to say, right here, you can thrive and you can become that woman that you want to be. And that's really what we're working on. And we're looking at it from an anti-radicalization perspective. But it still goes back to basic empowerment of women does help, even with some of these new challenges that the world is facing.
Sounds to me that there are many ways to educate girls and women beyond the classroom, as important as that is, giving them hope and giving them agency. I was thinking how devastating it is to hear in the news in war-stricken society when a hospital or a school gets bombed. We have so many examples of that, too many to mention recently in Syria with hospitals. I suppose schools and hospitals are the easy target, aren't they? How do we respond as the world to that, to protect these assets?
Well, of course, it used to be that these kind of assets were more likely to be left alone in war.
Sacred, almost,
yes.
Eh?
Now they're very likely to be targeted, and the civilian casualties in warfare now, as a percentage of the total casualties, is so much larger than it used to be. So devastating circumstances. I think the legal frameworks do matter, and that goes back to the earlier discussion that if combatants know that there is a risk of these war crimes being brought to book after the conflict is over, then perhaps it becomes less likely that schools and hospitals will be targeted. But in this realistic world we have to live in, we know that some of that will still happen. People will flee. They will try and get themselves to a safer physical place. And as they do that, we need to be there with the humanitarian assistance that will make a difference, including education.
And let's just touch on that, the aftermath of a war. You know, you almost think that all the crises end when the war ends, but that is not true. You need to rebuild institutions, you need to integrate communities, individuals into their communities. What initiatives are there in Nigeria to make that happen?
Okay, for the reintegration, the government is working on actually having a rehabilitation and reintegration. But the sad thing is that lots of people, not Chibok girls, women and girls, have been rescued. But the truth is, most of them are just left to go back to their communities without rehabilitation, without any reintegration. It's hard to believe that people have gone through so much, and you go back to your communities and you're still being labeled, stigmatized as Boko Haram wives. That is one of the inhuman things anyone could go through. It's such an indignity for anyone who has gone through such to go back and be labeled as such. It's sad because hundreds of women have been rescued and there is no concrete thing from the government. Civil society organizations as ours are trying with regards to psychosocial support for people who have actually been rescued. There are girls, the Bring Back Our Girls movement has also done a lot of things with regards to this. There are girls who actually escaped on their own. We have 57 Chibok girls who escaped, not rescued by the government. There was no rescue. And 10 are in the US. You know, lots of people have continued to give support, like the U.S. Congresswoman, Frederica Wilson, and some other local NGOs giving support. There's a Rebecca girl who escaped on her own. She's doing so well. Before, she could not talk, but now she's bold. She can speak, and that is really impressive. We need so much more from government regards. There's little we can do, but it's also impactful we do something. But the government can actually do such a larger thing with regards to psychosocial support. Chibok parents are not getting it. As I speak to you, 18 parents have lost their lives because of high blood pressure and the trauma of losing a child. There's no closure. And to also have people who have returned not getting the same psychosocial support, rehabilitation they need, it's really a bad one on us as a nation.
Rachel, last word from you about the importance of these partnerships.
I think the importance is, she's talking about the Nigerian experience. She's working from a global level, but all of us, the work that we do will impact directly on that little girl in Kilifi. If we make the general environment better, it will impact on that little girl. And it's for us to recognize that we need to hold governments accountable, but we also need to work together to be able to reinforce the positive work that governments are doing and to be able to as much as we can leverage the resources that we have. At this conference today, we have people working on health, nutrition, education, so many different spheres. And putting that all together can actually make the life of those girls much better.
Rachel Muthoga, Cecilia, Aransiola, Julia Gillard, thank you very much, and good luck with the very important work that you are doing. We can change the world one step at a time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, all our viewers, for joining us at Women Deliver 2016. Please stay tuned for more great programs. You can also tweet your questions and comments using hashtag WDLive and find us throughout the day right here on this channel. Our Twitter handle, @Women Deliver. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.